place the Sheikah slate in the pedestal.
Glad I just have the key to everything.
Basically.
It's a gift. That iPad of yours.
It has camera capabilities. It connects to the only internet of the land, and has Angry Birds.
Yep.
Dude, those sideburns though.
He's got some crazy stuff going on there.
Like, this is a hairy man. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, Zelda's just into some hairy dudes.
I mean, his body's pretty hairless.
That's 'cause he's Asian.
It's not the case.
That is... Oh, it's B. Being lied to at all points in time. Oh, I just grabbed back on. Okay, duly noted. Am I just falling down?
Yeah, that's the
Basic.
fastest way down the tower.
I mean... Well, that's unfortunate. Oh, God! That sucks! That broke
God.
you.
My leg.
I seem to have forgotten why I'm standing here with this lantern. Is it because I can't see because I'm always wearing this hood, or what was I talking about? Do you see that shining piece of dookie protruding from the ground?
Ooh, thing that looks like a turd in the sand.
I need you to go investigate it with this, Well, I'm not giving you anything. Sam, tell me a story.
Alright. What would you like to hear about, RJ?
So, tell me about how your friend, Jerome, found a giant plank.
Okay, well.
And then became friends with it through the power of romantic love.
Alright, so this man Jerome, he's my friend from Tale of Two Cities, Minnesota, and he had a girlfriend. Her name was Susan, and Susan's father was he was
Oh my god. Oh god.
he had shares with a certain, oh my lord.
It was about Jerome and Susan.
Yeah, so Jerome's father had shares in this very popular and distinguished hardware company and shop. And Jerome's father, he had a monopoly on the lumber business. And it was to such an extent that the whole Enron fiasco was like totally just put to shame in the dust. And Jerome's girlfriend's father put many people out of jobs, and it was really, really bad for the economy of the United States of America. And also the Dominican Republic suffered heavy losses from the inability to ship lumber. So, realizing that this arrangement just wasn't going to work out, the U.S. government had decided that they needed to take desperate measures. But U.S. law dictates that due to the way we've based our system on capitalism, they can't really do much about them having a monopoly. So they had to rely on the next best thing, which was extortion through the use of their ties to other governments and enterprises. So what they did was the U.S. government, at the time under the direction of Bill Hinkston, they decided that it was time to take a look at the policies put in place with China, because China has this deal with lumber where the only the lumber that's been painted red can be used in the construction. This is why all of their buildings are red, because they can only use the red lumber in construction.
What?
And
What did the president of the time think of China?
Bill Hingston he didn't have a super friendly relationship with China. They were actually at war 2 years prior, in the year 1968, and the war consisted of battleships. The U.S. using great battleships such as the SS Alabama, and China using opposing ships made of this red wood, which was the only wood that they were legally allowed to make structures out of. And their grand flagship was called the SS Silverware. It was a play on the old saying of the American people, making fun of the way Chinese people name their children. They name their children by dropping silverware down a flight of stairs, and it's very bad and very racist of them. And so they called the ship the SS Silverware to taunt the Americans on the waters of Indonesia and India. That's where they fought the battles of the lumber industry. So anyway, the first great sea battle of the lumber industry was fought in Indonesia, off the coast of Nepal, which has since become a landlocked island from all the great mudslides that they caused in the Great War. So off the coast of Nepal, they were fighting with their battleships, and China was just suffering heavy losses. They couldn't keep up with the fast American metal battleships, especially the SS Alabama. It just had a huge speed advantage over the SS Silverware, and the Chinese had decided. Well, there was some infighting at first because they decided, why the hell did we name this ship the SS Silverware if it's made of wood? That's stupid. Why do we call our silverware if in fact it's just chopsticks made out of wood? That's stupid. So the Chinese had to rethink their battle strategy, and they went back to the drawing board, and they made a new ship. This time they made it out of stone. That one sucked. It sank. So they made the next ship out of metal, just like the Americans. But this went against their prideful mindset, in which they wouldn't take after the Americans. In fact, they'd been fed up for 60 years making all these American products, but they always were labeled as second best, because they had to put made in China on everything. When, the Americans were telling their people that it was them doing the engineering, and they were just outsourcing the creation of their products to China, when in reality it was China doing all the engineering. The Americans didn't know that. They had been deluded by the big brother government that had been fostered over 70 years. So that none of the Americans knew. They all thought they were super geniuses, but it was actually the Chinese. And so the Chinese, using this knowledge to their advantage, realized that they actually had the upper hand in the Great Lumber War fought on the sea. And so they created this metal ship called the SS Idaho. Now you may think that that's the name of a state in the United States of America, but the Americans, not to be outdone, realized that they couldn't have a ship called the SS Idaho without themselves using that name to once again steal glory from the Chinese in the 1960s and 70s. So they realized what they had to do. They actually broke Montana into two separate states and called one half of it Idaho. And they they told the American citizens this was our idea. We came up with the name Idaho. The Chinese stole the name Idaho from us to make their new flagship, the SS Idaho. And so the Americans have it sounds like a real tinfoil hat conspiracy theory, but it's actually true. The Americans have been taking ideas from the Chinese for the longest time. And late in the lumber war of the 1960s, the Americans and the Chinese have taken their Great Sea Battle. It's migrated slowly from the coast of Indonesia to the coast of India, and they're fighting. They're going around the coast. It's getting real heated. The Chinese are taking heavy losses. The Americans are taking heavy losses. Neither side seems like they're gaining any traction. And then suddenly, the Americans finally they developed their own technology for the first time in 70,000 years. They developed their own technology. It was called lasers, and these lasers were real intuitive. They could spot a Chinese man, very specifically a Chinese man. They wouldn't be wanting to target their own men, but they could spot a Chinese man from 3,000 miles out on the ocean, and lead the Americans right to them. It was a real genius idea by the Americans. No one had ever thought of it before. It was a real good invention on the Americans' part. I got to give that one to the Americans. They were just super intuitive. And that was their first real victory in the Great Lumber War. When it was actually Jerome's girlfriend's father that came up with the idea of the laser-guided missile beam that ended up sealing the deal for the Americans in the Great Lumber War. And then the unspeakable happened. Whereas Chinese had been using wood to create chopsticks, which is what they made their previous ships out of, like the SSL. Not
chopsticks?
Yeah, chopsticks.
They
like
made
the
them out of
SS
chopsticks.
Yeah, they made them out of chopsticks. Just these little flimsy wood pieces, which is what they made the SS Silverware out of. That was what they call it, the SS Silverware, because they made it out of silverware. It's a real bad move by the Chinese. It was just a real design flaw. It was just a bad idea. And so the Americans had this new idea. They could create faster ships than the Chinese had out of wood, which seemed real counterintuitive for the Americans. But it was actually a really smart idea. Moved, as we all know, from our physics classes in high school and elementary school, moves faster in the water than metal. It also doesn't sink, which is why the Great Lumber War caused so many casualties on both sides, because the metal ships would just sink all the time, and it was a real bad plan by both sides in the Great Lumber War. But anyway, one of America's allies, Europe, had to step in to help America build this newfangled invention that they'd come up with lumber. They called it the plank. And this plank was what eventually brought American engineering to its peak. They could make all sorts of things with planks. You could make silverware, real silverware, like a fork and a knife. You could make knives out of this silverware, and out of these planks. And you could make troughs for feeding animals. The agriculture industry just reached a boom. It was so good for America and for Europe. They let Europe take some of the credit for that because they were their allies. Trying to get any of the credit, they had to figure out how to make a trough that didn't violate any patent laws. It was real bad for the agriculture industry in China, and China had to call on their allies, Tahiti. Tahiti didn't have any good ideas. There were no good engineers in Tahiti, so they quickly scrapped that idea. But because of this, America won the Great Lumber War of 1968. That took 7 years to complete. And that's how Jerome found out about planks.